Hi, everyone. My name is Nariman, and I'm the founder of Pewter, the open source internet computer. And in this talk, I'm hoping to show you how to successfully launch and scale an open source project. But before we dive deep into it, let me tell you a little more about myself and Pewter. So I've been programming for 30 years, wrote the first line of code when I was 7, and professionally since 17. I studied computer science at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, and I worked at a number of local companies writing code. But towards the end of my studies, I started my first company focused on large scale web data extraction. I'm mostly interested in web and distributed systems. This is the common theme in my career, and which has also led me to my work on Pewter in 2021. First as a hobby slash side project, and then full time a couple years later. I've done a number of other open source projects, such as Pewter.js, which is a very popular SDK for Pewter, KVJS, which is in-process caching module for Node.js. It's a mouthful for a very simple Redis clone in JavaScript. Oops.js for undo redo management in applications. Just Control Z, Control Y, things like that. It's more complicated than it sounds, so I needed a module for it. And PHP Wark, which is a module for reading WARC files, web archive files, which is used in massive scale web crawling. This talk is about Pewter, though, because that's my most successful open source project. So what is Pewter? Well, in short, Pewter gives every user a computer on the internet. So if you go to pewter.com, which is the hosted version of our open source project, create an account, you are immediately given a virtual computer in the cloud. You have a certain amount of storage, some database, some other types of resources that you can use to store files in, interact with your files, and do a number of other stuff. The immediate question on everybody's mind when they see Pewter or they hear about it is that, what is it even used for? Well, just like any other computer or quote unquote operating system, I'm going to get into trouble for saying that, but just like any other computer or operating system, Pewter is pretty general purpose. You can use it for anything. A lot of users use it to store files. In other words, as an alternative to Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive. You put your files in your Pewter account and you immediately have access to them from anywhere at any time. In fact, if you have a device that can run a browser, you can access your files. So a really interesting alternative to Dropbox at all, with a very fresh UI, which looks like a desktop environment. We have a lot of apps. So you put your files in there, you can interact with them with a lot of different applications. We have spreadsheet software, we have a word processor, we have presentation software, we have music editor, audio editor, video editor, photo editor, all sorts of productivity software, but not just limited to that. We also have a lot of games, puzzle games, adventure games, action games. A lot of people just come to Pewter to play games. Whatever floats your boat, you can find it on Pewter. But another unique aspect of Pewter is that by the virtue of being a cloud native operating system, it also makes it incredibly easy to publish websites and build applications on top of it. Basically, as you can see in the screenshot, you have a directory, you can right click on it and publish it as a website or deploy it as an app. There's no other account you need, you don't know any other infrastructure, it's just there. Your file system is in the cloud. Anyway, but I would say the most important aspect of Pewter for this talk is the fact that it's a pretty large open source project. Pewter was open sourced in March 2024, and very quickly it became one of the fastest growing commercial open source projects of the year. We were topping all the charts when it comes to open source, and in the past 2 years, we've accumulated 41,000 GitHub stars, more than 400,000 downloads, and 370 contributors. We also have a few thousand forks under our belt. So I'm hoping that the story of how we ended up open sourcing Pewter and how we scale it to what it is right now could be helpful for others who are thinking about the same thing. So I've broken down the talk into four sections. The why. Why would you want to open source a project anyway? Pre-launch. What you would need to do before launching your project or open sourcing your project to maximize your odds of success. Launch, what do you do on launch day? Where do you put your project? How do you distribute it? Post launch, what happens behind the scenes when your project took off and you got a lot of attention? How can you keep the momentum going? So on and so forth. So let's get into the why. So I'm just going to tell you a story of how we ended up open sourcing Pewter. And I think a lot of the reasons for us might apply to a lot of other projects as well. Now, reasons vary depending on who's open sourcing a project, what project they're open sourcing, what the goals are, the end goals are. Sometimes you're not even doing it for community aspects. Sometimes it's because you want to, as they say, commoditize the competition, which is a very common reason larger companies open source projects. So there are different reasons, but I'm guessing a lot of people are interested to know why a small project by a startup would do such thing. Now, Pewter was not open source in the beginning. For the first, I would say, 3 years, it was closed source. I first publicly launched it on Reddit in 2022. It went pretty viral. It got hundreds of thousands of impressions, hundreds of comments, messages, emails. And what I noticed when I was triaging the comments and feedback is that a lot of people, maybe the number one request was open sourcing Pewter. And well, I did notice it, but I didn't immediately open source it because I needed better reasons for it, especially having investors. You want to have a really good business aspect as well when you're making such a decision. So a few months later, I ended up meeting the founder of N8N, which is a really massive open core workflow automation platform. And he told me that, hey, you're an operating system, you have to open source it. And he referred me to another person who's an expert at open source by the name of Heather Meeker. And then she gave me the real reasons of why you should open source your project, especially with something like Pewter, which is branded as an operating system. So the first thing is that for us, one of the biggest reasonings behind it is that when you open source your project, you're basically front loading the cost of marketing to developers. What that means is that you're exchanging the source code for brand equity with developers almost overnight. If you're lucky enough to get a lot of attention at your launch, this is something you will notice. You will immediately get a lot of love from developers. This was especially important for us because we are a developer-first platform. Even though you see a desktop environment, what we really focused on is actually developers. So we had a lot of problems marketing to developers beyond just impressing them with the desktop environment. And I think open sourcing Pewter almost immediately erased that problem overnight. You also build trust with users for the same reason, because if the source code, even if the user doesn't read the source code, just the source code being out there under proper license builds a lot of trust with end users. Now, it doesn't really work with open sourcing doesn't really work with every type of project, but it tends to do well with infrastructure and dev tools. There are different reasons for this, but I would say some of it is because the people who contribute to it are most likely the users of it as well. So they can, and it solves an immediate problem for the target audience of that project. So it does great with infra and dev tools, but for example, it doesn't do really well with, for example, the classic example is games. I'm not sure I've heard of a successful open source game yet. Now, it does work incredibly well for operating systems, but the nature of being hyper horizontal and being and being able to adapt to pretty much every single use case under the sun, and wanting to build a standard or an app ecosystem around your platform, operating systems have an incredible opportunity when it comes to open source. The biggest example would be Linux, obviously. There are other reasons, but those are, at least to me, secondary. For example, getting contributors. Who doesn't want free software engineers? But the reality of it is, unless you are a big project, having network effects when it comes to getting contributors, or you're really good at hunting down contributors. In my experience, projects don't really get free contributions. So that I don't think is the best goal, and it's not very realistic. And another reason for it, in terms of business, is that especially for infrastructure, when companies want to rely on your piece of software, is that, hey, at least I'll have the source code if they go out of business. So even though there are, in a lot of enterprise contracts, there are checks and balances for this, but at least you want to have an official open source version of your infrastructure so that you give a little bit of peace of mind to people who want to build businesses on top of your offering. And being open source is a great way to do that. Now, so if you've decided to open source your project, you need a pre-launch plan. I really believe in this. I don't think you should just jump into it and put it out there. There are a few stuff you probably have to take care of before you put your code on GitHub and make it public. First thing is that make sure the product appeals to developers, because most of people who are going to be contributing to you or carrying the torch when it comes to open source are developers. There are early adopters, there are self-hosters, but I would say developers are the number one audience. So being useful or interesting, you don't even have to be useful. I think if you're interesting, that also works. Being useful or interesting to developers would help you a lot. That's a different way of saying makes, if you've heard of, make something people want, but in this case, you want to make something that developers want. And polish the product. Some people say it's great to put an unfinished product in open source. That's fine, but I think at least when it comes to demo or the first look, it would be great if you have a polished product that clearly shows what's happening. So I'm all for polishing the product before open sourcing it. But people have different methods when it comes to this. Some people intentionally don't polish the product because they want to get others to help them polish it and set the direction. But to me, if you have the vision of what you're doing, polishing the product is a pretty good bet. It would be great if you have a hosted or a demo version. Even though you usually cannot have a demo version on the GitHub README itself, like if you go to the repo, you can't really play around with the code right there and then with the software or the package or the code itself. But it would be great, if possible, if you're doing a type of product that can be hosted and demoed, it would be great if you have one and then later on you can link to it. This would help them, help your target audience to play around with the product before they dive deeper into the open source. Create a dedicated website for your project. It's always good. I mean, I personally, whenever I see a library, a package, any open source project that has a dedicated website for the open source, I love it. And I think a lot of developers feel that way as well. So if you can create a dedicated website for your project, that would be great. Right now with AI, it's much easier. Before, you had to know how to design websites. If you're doing a C package, you're not necessarily good at web design, but these days you can just use Claude Design and put together an incredibly good-looking website with all the information in it within minutes. So I would say having a dedicated website is table stakes at this point. Now, so once you have this stuff, the whole set side and the quality and everything under control, you need to think about the code. I do not recommend you just open source a project like that. I think you should go through the code, maybe even create a new repository. Either create a new repository and copy your code in there, or clean up your commit history. We all do mistakes. We all make mistakes when it comes to committing. Sometimes credentials, very, very common. Uh, there's uh, there's been a lot of research done on this. You're likely to leak your credentials, especially when you're solo developing a project. So either create a new repository and copy everything in there, or clean up your commit history and make sure you're not leaking anything. Maybe your future plans, maybe you're, I don't know, using bad language, or more importantly, security issues and credentials. Then you need to pick a license. Uh, Picking a license is very important in that, first of all, it sets the tone of how this project can be extended in the future. So this is one of those things that you might actually have to think through carefully, because there are a handful of open source licenses and they all have their own peculiarities. So you want to make sure you know what you're getting into. Some licenses uh, you can go from more strict to less strict. You can move up and down the level of restriction in the licenses, but sometimes you can't go up. So there are one-way door sort of decisions when it comes to licenses. So it's a good idea to actually sit down and think about it. One recommendation I have, obviously you should talk to a lawyer and not blame me later on, but one recommendation I have for you is that pick a license that is popular or well known. Creating a custom license or ChatGPTing a new license, these are typically recipe for, I wouldn't say disaster, it might be disaster, but this could seriously hinder the adoption of your project. Just think about it. If somebody puts an MIT project in front of you, you're not going to think twice about using it. But if somebody puts I don't know, a UBC, a UBC license in front of you, you're not going to, it's likely you're going to talk to a lawyer, or there's going to be a lot of thinking happening before you adopt that piece of code. Now, this is way worse at larger companies, because so these licenses are well understood, and the moment you deviate from them, you're going to end up having to go through multiple hoops to get your project in the door. So why open source if you want to go with a self-made license? It pretty much hinders your distribution, the distribution advantage that you have, very, very massively. Now, you pick your license, you also have to audit your own licenses, see what libraries you use, packages, icons, assets, anything. You want to make sure that all these licenses are compatible, you're doing the attribution right, you gave credit to the right people, to the right entities. So you want to make sure you do this. Legal stuff aside, this is open source. You want to be you want to be mindful of other people's licenses and open source projects. One thing I really do recommend is doing a security audit, especially if you already have users or you have a hosted version of your product. Do a full security audit of your code before you put it out. You can hire security companies, but recently AI has been incredible at finding security issues in code bases. So you can just run Claude Code and ask it to look into the security issues, make no mistakes, be very thorough. Or if you can get your hands on the more advanced model like Mythos, the one that some companies have access to, it would be great. I've heard good things about it. I don't have access to it, but even with Claude Code and Codex and these AI agents, we've had pretty good results. When we open source, this wasn't the case. We actually had to hire a security company to audit our code. It was a whole thing. It actually took a lot of time. That's for security. Another thing that I've never seen this anywhere, but this I think is a very important point, is that you should think about an extension system. Now, what does that mean? In this context, extension system means that a method, a system whereby you can basically extend your open source project with proprietary code. For example, with Pewter, we have the open source project and we have the hosted project, which is a commercial version of Pewter. Now, there are a little bit of difference between the open source project and the closed source one, the hosted one. So there's some proprietary code that gets mounted on top of the open source that we use in production. Now, extension system, if you have a hosted version or a commercial version of your open source project, I strongly recommend you do this, because if you don't, having an open source project and a hosted version feels like building two completely separate products. It's incredibly painful. It takes a long time to develop the tooling, and it's going to cause a lot of issues because of the differences between environments and the requirements and end user expectations. So the extension system, I would recommend, in case you have a hosted version of your open source project, I strongly recommend you design an extension system for your open source project so that others can extend it, mainly yourself in the beginning. I wish I knew this. This would have saved us so much time. I think months of suffering, bugs, outages, and things like that. I have another talk about the extension system of Pewter where I go deeper into the Pewter architecture. I'm going to talk about how the extension system works, but basically one of our biggest inspirations was WordPress. So if you can look into WordPress as an extension system, or even Pewter, you could learn a lot about how you could implement an easy one. So once your code is ready, you also want to make your repo attractive. There is some housekeeping when it comes to your repository so that it looks good, professional, and it is actually good and professional. So one really low-hanging fruit would be about section for your repository. Just the right-hand sidebar on your GitHub repo. Fill it in with your project description, add a link to your project website or the hosted version or the demo, add a bunch of tags. Don't be as spammy as I am. I think this is too many. I should remove some of them, but add relevant tags. They do help bring in traffic into your repository. And then the rest, what you see there, README, license, everything, those are actually filled in automatically from your README and your project. So once you have that about section, the most important part of your repository is actually README. And that was a low-hanging fruit, the about section, and then you have the README. Design a user-friendly README. I would say don't vibe code your README. Actually, it should come from the mouth of the creator, how you explain what your project is, how you would want end users to perceive it. Design it very nice. Have an icon, put it at the top, add some helpful links. You want to have a link to the demo, to community and support links, your Discord, your Twitter, X, your Reddit, email address, anything you might think that your community would find helpful. So you want your README. The README discussion is pretty long and it's very project specific, but you want it to be well designed and show what the project is within a few seconds. So that's why you want to have the icon. You want, ideally, if possible, have a screenshot. Have a screenshot of your, if it's an end user application or an application with a GUI or any sort of demo to it, add a screenshot to it. Add a screenshot right at the top so that people can immediately see what they're getting into. Add a short description after, and then I would say tell users how to install or clone or get started in developer environment with your project. Keep it very, very simple. Don't go on and on talking about the project. I know you find it enticing to talk about it all the time, but in my experience, users just want to understand what it is very quickly and get it started. You need a number of repo files. So README is the most important one, I would say. License, which is an obvious one I already talked about. You want to have your contributing file, set out the contributing guidelines. What do you expect from the community? What are the guidelines they need to follow? That sort of thing. Again, I would err on the side of simplicity rather than having a lot of rules. These days, a lot of people use AI to contribute code, and AI typically reads contributing MD and takes it into account. So maybe you can be more thorough and assume that AI is just going to follow it. Have a security file explaining your security procedures, how to report a security issue. If you have a bug bounty, link to it, or you can explain it there. Which also means it's a pretty good idea to have a bug bounty program, but that's not part of the repo files. Have a proper security procedure, a security handling procedure, or a security report procedure. Typically, you should have a dedicated email address for security issues, for responsible disclosure. You want to have that publicly listed on your repo, and especially in this file. You should also obviously tell people not to report them publicly and have some SLAs in place. If you have a bug bounty, set out the bug bounty guidelines as well. Now, these days there are two other, well, actually more than two, but there are a number of very important new repo files, which is for AI, agents, Claude. We don't have the Claude MD, we have agents MD. Basically, what they are is that you set out what the project is, how to contribute to it, to the architecture and everything. And your audience is actually agents, AI agents. So you're talking to AI agents in this file. Is pretty awesome actually, and they follow it really well. So when you set that, for example, you can explain the architecture. You can repeat some of the contributing stuff, or you can just directly link to contributing and tell them to follow the guidelines there. The coding style and the things that are specific to AI. For example, you don't want them to produce copious amounts of code. You want to, if that's your preference, you want them to keep things short, not to be too verbose, not to cause regressions, things like that. Again, typically the stuff you say in agents really does apply to humans as well, but there are some nuances. You can go take a look at our agents MD file. We've had great success with it, and I would recommend you definitely put this there. One thing you should do before you go public with your repo is to create a number of good first issues. These are issues that, as the name suggests, they're good for first-time contributors to your repository. You create these issues that would take something between, I would say, 5 to 15 minutes. They're easy to understand. They're well written. A lot of times they actually have a step-by-step guide on how to actually take care of this issue. The idea is that when people find your repo on launch day, you want them, if they're interested in it, you want them to be able to immediately pick up an issue and contribute to the repository. You want to keep it easy because this is a new project. Nobody aside from your team already knows how to work with it. Even if you use AI, this is still an issue. So you want it to be very well written, easy to do, and just something to ease your contributors into contributing to your project. So I would say create honestly as many as you can, but you don't want to create 100 of them. And do label them as good first issues. GitHub already has this. In case you're publishing on GitHub, you can mark them as good first issues. A lot of times people just randomly find them and contribute, even if they don't know about your project. So it's a really good hack to ease people into joining your project. This is the top portion, the lead of our readme.md file. You can find it on at github.com/heypeter/Peter. So we keep it pretty simple. Again, we have the icon or the branding, and then we have the shortest description of the project, what the project is, a link for demo. With Peter, you used to be able to go to peter.com and immediately see the desktop, but now you have to create an account. But again, it's super quick. You can immediately see it. And then some of the helpful links, peter.com itself, our app store, the developer documentation, and social links. So once you have all of this, I think you're pretty much good to go for launch. Uh, the best way to test the waters, I would say, is your current users. If you already have users, obviously. So I'm assuming for this portion of the launch plan, I'm assuming that you have the hosted version, you have a number of users, and you have some audience. In that case, I would say come launch day, put the link to your repository in the product itself, whether that's on the homepage or inside the dashboard, depending on what your project is. Now, this is mostly doable with software that users interact with that has a graphical user interface. With CLIs, it's a different story. If you have a blog, project blog, personal blog, obviously announce it. There goes without saying, and you can test the waters. You can see how people are reacting. Are they starting the project? Are they reacting to it? Are they sharing it? So you can get a feel of how this launch is going. If you think you're on a good trajectory to go viral, maybe it's time to do an email blast to your user base. Um, Email blast to your user base is very helpful because they can also provide you with very honest feedback. They already know the project and they can tell you if they feel like you're not explaining the project well, or hey, they can't even run it. There are bugs. So some of the obvious bugs might just come out like that. So it's a good thing to start from the inner circle and work your way out, in my opinion. Yeah, as I said, do soft launches first if you can. Uh, Sometimes you're simply not going to gain any traction. And a lot of times that's just because of the packaging. This is my experience that same project, different packaging, different way of explaining it makes a world of difference. I remember the first time I launched Pewter, I put it on Reddit and I called it something really buzzwordy, the operating system in the cloud, this and that. I got not only did I not get any upvotes, I got actually downvotes. I went negative. And then the exact same project, I think maybe a couple of weeks later, a couple of days later, I put it on Reddit, and then I just said, "Hey, this is what I've been working on for a year and a half." And then uh, it went super super viral. It got like 600,000 clicks, something like that. It was crazy. It was the exact same project, but just different way of explaining what it is. That's the only difference between the two posts, basically. So it's very very important how you package your project. Now sometimes you have something like Open Cloud where it breaks through walls and becomes incredibly massive. But if your goal is to have a system in place to replicate this and increase your odds, I would suggest that you do soft launches. Maybe even those projects have done soft launches. I wouldn't be surprised if an experienced founder like him has done soft launches before he put it out completely. Anyway, if you're not gaining traction, a lot of times the problem is not the project, just the packaging of it. So be mindful of that. And then once you think that the package is there, once you think you have good odds, aside from the email blast, now you can actually take it to the outside world. Some of the best places to publish your project would be Reddit, Hacker News, and X. These are great places to launch. Reddit is really my all-time favorite. For some reason, I have a really good rapport with the community. I love them. The other ones are great too, but for me, Reddit has been the perfect place to launch projects and update the community. It's just incredible. They're very nice. Um, Hacker News. One thing about Reddit before I move on. The good thing about Reddit is that if you launch today and you feel like, hey, I didn't do a good job or I had bugs in the software, you can delete the post and come back in a couple of weeks and do a proper one. It's not as strict as, let's say, Hacker News, where you post once and good luck posting again, right? Which brings me to Hacker News. Hacker News is also an incredible place to post your project. You can either just post your project or you can prefix it with show HN, which means show Hacker News. That's a label you put on your own projects to tell the community about it. Hacker News has incredible virality potential. If you hit number one, you're going to get a huge amount of traffic. You're going to be reposted on pretty much every social media out there. It's incredible. Hacker News is very focused. Um Generally speaking, you're going to get more criticism from Hacker News community. I think that's just part of the culture of Hacker News, where they try to help each other out with finding flaws in the product or the business. It's good. I mean, it might hurt you, but a lot of times, there are incredible points in what they're saying. So I would say that Hacker News has a reputation for being harsh, but I think you should listen to the comments and take them seriously. And X, well, I've never been good at this. I'm not a social media person. I'm pretty bad at it, but I do put it on X whatever I have. Never, I don't think I've ever had anything go viral on X. It's always been the side effect of other stuff happening. One thing you got to be careful, especially because you're doing an open source project. Don't be spammy. Uh, Developers, early adopters, technical community, they just don't like this kind of stuff. They don't like spamming, and they're very, very quick to find out if you're spammy. And again, the last point is basically the same thing as I was talking about the packaging. Is another note on it. Try to be factual and not buzzwordy. I don't think the open source community likes that kind of stuff. They're more about factual. Factual doesn't mean boring, by the way, but just putting together a bunch of buzzwords and trying to get that to get a lot of attention typically doesn't work in open source. Now, if you're lucky, you put your project out and you get a lot of attention. In that case, if that happens, you're going to have a lot of busy weeks ahead. Usually, the trajectory of virality is that you peak within the first 24 hours and then you quickly decline, and that's it. Uh, at least in our case, this thing lasted for many weeks. It just kept coming and coming and coming. We would get issues, we would get questions, emails. It just didn't stop for us. Now we made it worse by self-inflicted wound. A couple weeks in, we did another launch, which was for the backend. That's a whole other story, but that kept the momentum going for months, and we're still pretty popular. But I would say we're stabilized by now. So make sure you don't burn out. I mean, I was up 20 hours a day. I wasn't getting enough sleep. It was very difficult to stay on top of everything. So you got to be careful. Like it's easy to get lost and drown in the issues and everything that comes to you once your project basically blows up. You're going to get a lot of interest from companies, investors, people who want to work for you. So you're going to get a lot of emails. A lot of people would want to meet you, learn more about you and the project. Uh, it's up to you if you want to take them. I don't have any. I try to take as many as I could. It's fun. And you make a lot of interesting connections. I liked it, but it's really up to you. I mean, if it's a hobby project and you don't want to talk to anyone, like any companies or investors, you can just skip over this one. One thing you should do so that your community doesn't burn out. I see this a lot with a lot of open source projects where issues just pile up, and because there's so much work, these people who open issues don't get a response, and that causes problems with the community retention. Now, the best way for me to do this is just like typical project management, define some public SLAs, service level agreements, uh, and prioritize based on that. Try to respond as quickly as you can, at least when it comes to triage. Uh, do the prioritization as quickly as possible so that the community knows that you're going to respond. Honestly, this is something we've struggled a lot with because just of the volume sometimes is really large. I mean, we did some house cleaning and removed a lot of them, closed a lot, like maybe 1,000 of them. But this is very tough. This is the grind that makes the project awesome, but it's also very difficult to stay on top of. Again, I would say the momentum will eventually decline and stabilize, and then start going up again if you take care of your project, if the project is useful and it actually has PMF or product market fit. So yes, like that peak, you're gonna hit the peak, it's gonna go down, and then slowly gonna pick up again. Um, that's for post launch. Now, just to summarize everything, launch is basically the way you have to think about launch is that it is this spark, but community is the engine. So you have to make sure that the engine stays healthy and well oiled and take care of the community. It's not easy. Community leadership is at times very difficult. You're going to meet interesting people in the community from all walks of life that you don't necessarily agree with on many things, and things get personal. So there's a lot of drama in the open source community, and everybody's going to look up to you to resolve these issues. So expect a lot of non-technical drama. In fact, maybe more than 50% of what you encounter in the community is actually non-technical. A lot of conflict resolution, a lot of decisions you have to make on the fly when it comes to community. You're going to get backlash. You're going to get, in my case, you're going to get email threats. You're going to get a lot of that stuff. But that's all part of this open source game. Everybody experiences it. In fact, you should count yourself lucky if that happens. That means people actually care about your project. Or maybe I'm being positive about it. So to sum it up, make something developers like, find interesting. That's the most important part before you even do anything, before you even do a launch or create all these plans. So make something that developers like. A lot of times, uh, developers have their own issues they want to resolve. They have their own problems that they want to create a piece of software for. So maybe solve your own problems and then create an open source project around it. But make something developers like, because that's mostly your target audience. And also, I think this is very important and is often overlooked in the open source community. Uh, just make it easy to understand, run, and tinker with. Don't make it like a 10-step process to download this thing and make it run. It should be 2 commands. And for example, in the case of JavaScript, our project, and you clone the repository, you npm install, you npm start. In fact, I bent over backwards to make sure that we never go beyond this. We've made so many trade-offs, so many horrible trade-offs, just to make sure that's always going to be npm install, npm start. So make it easy to understand, run, and tinker with. Don't expect people to have a PhD in distributed systems to run your project. You're going to limit your audience if you do that. And I would say have an operating rhythm. Basically, have some framework for project management so that you don't burn out. A lot of developers are ICs, and they like to just write the code. They don't want to deal with community. They don't want to deal with issues. If you get into open source, you're going to deal a lot with that, a lot. So you better have a plan to become more of a manager than just an individual contributor. And last but not least, have fun. Don't take it too seriously. Don't worry about, oh, my look has to look pristine and it has to be manicured before I put it out. Everybody's going to judge me. I mean, these days with AI, nobody's even going to read your code probably. It's only AI, so you don't even have to worry about that. So have fun. If you don't have fun, it's going to fizzle out. The project is going to fizzle out. The community will know that you don't care, or you feel burned out. So it's important to find, even if you don't feel it at times, it's important to find the positive and the fun aspects of it, because open source is amazing and it's changed the world. Why not have fun while working on it? That's about it.